In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a cake board look like real wood using fondant. This is part 1 of my cake board series, and I'm especially excited to be sharing these tutorials with you. If you're new to my channel and want to learn more about cake decorating, be sure to subscribe for more tips and tutorials. Now let's get started. First, we'll need these supplies. Starting from the left, we have fondant, a 12-inch cake board, plastic texture sheet, a sharp knife, a rolling fondant cutter, ribbon, rolling pin, finger spray bottle, a container of water. We have some gel paste food color, paint palette, brushes, a dusting pouch filled with cornstarch, and a fondant smoother. Now, I know this is a lot to remember, so I'll be introducing these items as I work with them throughout the video. They are also listed in the description below. Here I have a 2-pound container of fondant. The first thing that I'm going to do is open it and cut it in half. Next, I use a small amount of solid white vegetable shortening to coat my hands. This will prevent the fondant from sticking from my hands and fingers. Now, if you don't have solid white vegetable shortening like Crisco, you can use a small amount of coconut oil instead. It's very important to knead your fondant and make sure that it's nice and pliable before working with it. Next, I dust my surface with cornstarch using this dusting pouch. And next, I'm going to use a large rolling pin to roll out my fondant to about 1/8 of an inch thick. After it's rolled, I grab my cake base and lightly mist the top of it with water from my finger spray bottle. This will allow the fondant to stick to the cake base. I lightly roll the fondant around my large rolling pin and unroll it over the top of the cake base. Once covered, I continue to gently roll over the fondant to cover any areas of the exposed cake base. We want nice even coverage here. Next, I use my rolling fondant cutter to remove the excess fondant from around the cake base. To get a closer cut, I like to use a sharp knife placed right against the cake board and go around it like this. Next, I'll use this plastic texture sheet to press the wood texture into the fondant. This wood texture is actually a part of a texture set, and it's listed in the description below. I like this one a lot because it's double-sided, meaning that the texture is on both sides of the sheet. Next, I position the sheet onto my fondant, and using a fondant smoother, I start to press the texture into the fondant. Because my cake board is larger than the sheet, I need to lift and reposition it to make sure the entire top receives the wood texture. Oops, look, I have an air bubble here. So to remove this air bubble, I pierce it with a straight pin and very gently smooth the area with my fondant smoother. To get a deeper impression from the texture sheet, I'm going over the top again with a small rolling pin and my fondant smoother. Pressing onto the fondant so many times causes it to overlap the size of the cake base. So I'm going to use my knife to cut the excess fondant from the edges again. Now our board is nice and textured and ready for the next step, the painting. I have 2 paintbrushes, my paint palette, and a container of water. I'm working with a flat wide brush and a smaller round brush. I also have my gel paste colors, brown, orange, red, and black. These will give me the deep cherry wood look that I'm trying to achieve. And again, these are listed in the description below. I've used yellow instead of red in the past to get more of a golden wood tone, and I'll show you that later. I'm placing a drop or 2 of each color into its own spot in my palette. Starting with the wide flat brush dipped in water, I grab some of the brown color and dilute it into another well of my palette. Next, I apply the diluted brown to my textured fondant in broad strokes. The key is to start light and build up the color. The color will become trapped in the grooves of the texture and really bring the wood alive. Now I add more watered down brown. Next, I mix a little bit of orange with the brown and repeat the steps. And next, I add a little bit of the red to the brown for a deeper tone. And here I'm mixing the brown and black and paint over the knots in the texture to create more depth. I lift some of this darker color up and blend it out. Next, I add the brown-black color into the knots to define them. And finally, I add the slightly darker brown to certain areas of the board. As I mentioned, I've created more of a lighter golden wood effect on a cake board in the past. Check out this cake. Now be sure to adjust your wood color to your intended tone. And here is my painted board. It looks really wet and that's totally fine. I'm going to use some clear edible glaze spray to set the color. Now this is going to create a barrier to prevent the color from rubbing off. Next, I use double-sided tape and some black ribbon to finish the edges. This part is optional, but it creates a nice finished look. Similarly, you could use a black cake base instead. Next, I take some black food color and my small round paintbrush and paint the exposed white edges of the fondant around the side of my board. Once complete, I was able to place my cake onto the board and continue working on my cake. I was really pleased with the final cake. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button below and be sure to subscribe to be notified when I upload my next tutorial. As always, thanks for watching.